Are you ready for some over Sharon? Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the best darn show on the internet, the Over Sharon Show. I am joined today by my lovely co-host, namesake of the show, Sharon. And we are doing a solo episode, which always means the two of us because we don't want it to be the Over Brandon show. We already discussed that last week. So anyway, Sharon's going to open the show today with a quote, and then I am going to pull a card from the Influence of Angels tarot deck.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So the quote today is, it says, spirituality does not come from religion. It comes from our soul. We must stop confusing religion and spirituality. Religion is a set of rules, regulations, and rituals created by humans, which were supposed to help people spiritually. Due to human imperfection, religion has become corrupt, political, divisive, and a tool for power struggle. Spirituality is not theology or ideology. It is simply a way of life, pure and original as given by the Most High. Spirituality is a network linking us to the Most High, the universe, and each other. By Haile Selassie I.
Amazing. Or maybe Haley Selassie I.
Yeah.
We're not quite sure, everybody, but that's all right. The words are still pretty amazing. And the reason why we wanted to use that quote today was because we're going to be talking about a lot of the differences and a lot of things that affect the cosmology that Sharon and I share, although we don't have the same exact cosmology. I'm sure it's very, very similar, though. I can't talk. And so without any further ado, though, unless you want to say something about the quote.
No, I really like, well, since you asked, I do like the quote because it resonates with me. I came out of, I suppose, religion, and we've talked about this in multiple episodes about coming out of a place of feeling like you have these rules and these things that you have to follow. And so it was about 2020 that it started to happen, but over the last few years, I've done the whole wipe the slate clean and started from scratch to develop my cosmology and decide and make discernment on what it is that makes sense to me and what resonates with me. So that is why I like that quote.
Yeah, 100%. I came out of religion myself just a lot more years ago. I went to a Catholic school, and in the midst of that, from kindergarten to eighth grade, I went to a Catholic school. And somewhere around third or fourth grade, my mom got involved in a born again church. It was a Pentecostal Assemblies of God church, speaking in tongues and all that stuff. And I really got into it, really got into the Bible. And I've said this before, I would sometimes hang out with the adults in Bible study and just really loved it. And I saw myself as trying to spread this message to the world. And I think it's funny because that's kind of what we do here in the Over Sharon show. I mean, maybe not to the entire world yet. Ha ha ha. There's time though. But I feel like anyone who is interested finds the show and the people that watch the show, which shout out to the chat right now. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. People that resonate with it find it, and it's great because they feel like they're not alone, and they've probably had a lot of these questions that we've actually had too, and now we come across people that have these questions just as we had them. So we like to break it down in a way where we could, and that brings us to the card that I pulled because our journeys made us both stars.
The star.
The star card, or as they would say in Atlantic City, the store cord. Because at one of the casinos,
Oh my gosh.
their membership card is called the Star Card, and I never realized it until I got into tarot that I was like, oh my god, that's crazy. But anyway, the Star Card number 17. Like, out, how's that dolphin? That's like a shout out to Gabe right there. I should wish we pulled that card.
Oh, how funny. Yeah.
And then you have the lady with the stars dripping down to the water, as above, so below. The dolphins jumping out of the water, trying to perhaps glimpse um, the majesties of the heavens, even if just for a few seconds, while it jumps into the air out of the water.
What were your thoughts on the star card for the place in Atlantic City? What'd you say?
So every casino has like a player's card that you get, and every time you gamble, you put it in, you get points, and you could like use it for things to buy in the casino. But it was just kind of mind blowing because I see a lot of symbolism everywhere, and it seems to be used as this unconscious language. Most times it's, even when you're creating a logo, because I remember talking to people in businesses about creating logo and graphic design people, and a lot of times they do use symbolism. They said, yeah, it kind of just attracts people. And I think they're using it in like an innocent way, but other
Mhm.
people might use it in a nefarious way. But the fact that they call it the star card, and so many people aren't really aware of maybe tarot, or not making that connection, but they're still drawn in and they still have it in their pocket. They're like, I'm a star. I got my star card, baby. I
Hmm.
would suggest carrying this one more than a one from a casino. Although I do enjoy playing poker, so I'm not going to demonize casinos. But most things in the casino aren't in your favor. If you are skilled at poker, poker can be, the odds can be in your favor. So that's why I enjoy it. It's kind of like chess, but then you can win or lose money as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the first thing we wanted to talk about today, after we got through our quotes and card, was that how awesome our show is and how amazing it is. And it's really just because I
But
obviously we
that's not
both,
to put us on a pedestal.
yeah, oh yeah, we're getting there. The reason I say that all the time, and Sharon agrees, is obviously because it's our show. And what we just talked about before with both of our journeys through religion and different belief systems, now we get to, and like government stuff and law stuff and like birthing and all this stuff. It's not just cosmology, but you could just say the entire existence as a man and woman, like the realm earth, what the realm could be. All this stuff is what it highly interests us, and we get to break it down in a way where we could observe it and not judge things. Well, obviously we're not perfect, and that's what we want. That's what we're doing this message right now for. We don't want people to think we're perfect and, like Sharon said, put us on a pedestal, but we're just sharing all this stuff from an angle where we're not really judging it. We're just trying to take it in and see what works and take the best and leave the rest. And I think what happens sometimes to different shows, or this even happens like with governmental leaders or demigods and all this stuff, is that they start out doing a really good thing and then they get put on a pedestal by so many people. And then you get this co option of what the original message was and everything. And it all gets messed up. And then people start fighting and it's just more division, which would be so ironic for the Oversharing show to cause division because all we do is rail against it. So we just wanted to put out a message to everybody to not put us on a pedestal, everybody. I mean, obviously this is like tongue in cheek comedy, but serious too. The stuff that we talk about, we don't think we're like masters or better than anybody because we found this out. We just found this stuff that helps us in our life. It helps us not to be victims of all this crazy stuff that goes on in the world. And we just like to share it with people and have a good time. So we're
Yeah.
always telling people, know thyself. So don't worry about me and Sharon and how awesome we are. I mean, we are awesome. But what about you? You're an awesome person too. And I'm talking to anyone who's listening to this. You're part of the creation, you're part of God's plan. No matter what you may think, all the programming that happens to us to make us think we're worthless, the voices in the back of our head that tell us, just the voices that were telling Sharon, oh, you'll never be good enough to podcast. You won't be, you'll just be nervous and it'll suck. I had those voices when I first started too, but I was just like, fuck you, voices in my head. I'm doing this. And so Sharon also, once I got her to record a couple times, she was kind of infected and bit by the bug and excited about it. So she continued to do it, and we created the Oversharing show. And but anybody can do it. That's what we're trying to say. And not everybody obviously is meant to be a podcaster. Everybody has their own way to create art in this world. And I feel like if you find a way to create your art, despite the voices in your head, because they might never go away, it's kind of like your intuition, which we're going to talk about later. And I wrote about this in an upcoming book. Where you have to cultivate your intuition, right? That voice is always there, I think, that intuitional voice, but sometimes we could push it away or somehow not pay attention to it. The same thing, I think, with the egoic voices, they're still going to be there. They're still going to uh, tell you little things that can happen or when you could fail. But it's actually a good thing, I think, if you look at it in the proper way, because if you are going into a situation where there's danger, that voice can actually help you, right? But it's the overuse of that voice that then you become some kind of slave to, like a voice in your own head, and you stop yourself. It's just like when I started doing stand-up comedy, it took me till the age of about 36, 36, yeah, or 37 to start. And most of it was because I was afraid to go on stage. And the first time I was on stage at an open mic, I was like shaking, looking down at my notes, just like reading them, and then I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And now, I mean, I haven't really performed it probably in about 2 years or so, but I could easily just get on a stage and at least talk. I might not have funny things to say or maybe make everyone laugh, but I can get up there and not be nervous because of that. So, and something that I read a book about stand up before I started doing it. And something the author wrote is that a lot of people think that creators or performers that do this overcome their fear and they feel no fear. And it's like, no, they do it in spite of the fear. They still have the fear, but they'll still go on and go past it. And it reminds me of the Dune quote, the litany of fear, which we're always talking about. It's like, I will move on despite my fear. Fear is the mind killer, all that kind of stuff. But the fear is still there and you can use it. It's like a temperature gauge, right? But it's like, imagine fear as a thermometer, and you wake up and you look at and you see that it's like 20 degrees outside Fahrenheit, it's really cold, and you just get mad at the thermometer and you're like freaking out and you just want to destroy the thermometer. That would be like wanting to destroy your fears. You could just step back and realize that the fear is just a gauge that you can read the situation that's going on, and you could take that information and not let it overwhelm you. It's 20 degrees out, but you still got to go to work. So you'll get up and you dust off your car because it just snowed, and you start it up and you go despite all that. It's the same kind of thing. A lot of times we'll say have no fear and don't fear and fear is bad. But the more I think about it, and I think we've talked about this, you're still going to have the fear. So don't feel bad if you have the fear. It's going with it. Fear is just this natural response.
Using it as a tool.
Exactly. Using it as a tool, just like we said. So there's about many other things, right? We talk about the tarot being a tool, the Bible being a tool, all these different things. It's just, so if you put it on a pedestal or a pit, it comes to that, right? So if you put the fear on a pit in the pit and you hate it, it's probably going to be detrimental to you as well. Yeah. So we just wanted to give that little fun tongue in cheek. So don't worship us, guys. All right. Don't put us on a pedestal, even though, I mean, I know, look at this beautiful hair, my voice, you're like this giant. He needs to be put on a pedestal and fed grapes. Don't do it to me. And don't throw me in the pit either. I mean, you could do whatever you want. I'm just saying it's
If you
not
do,
gonna,
beware, because
yeah.
people fall off pedestals. Somebody will say something and do something that you realize, oh, I don't like that about that person, and then now you're upset because they fell off the pedestal that you put them on, and now
Yeah.
you're upset. It just doesn't do anybody any good. But to add to what you were saying about us sharing our experiences, once we came to the point where you and I done plenty of like just you and me episodes, like solo episodes with us, we started adding guests, getting people to bring their experiences. It kind of evolved into a sharing their spiritual journeys, sharing their cosmologies, how they arrived there, because every person experiences life differently. Everyone goes through different circumstances. So we're not saying that we arrived anywhere yes, we have arrived at some conclusions, and because of our experiences, we want to share those, but we're not the only ones, so we've brought people on to share theirs, and you can make the decision on what you decide makes sense for you. Use your discernment and come to your own conclusions. We're not telling people what to believe, how to believe. We're just sharing how we've arrived at our conclusions so far, how we've arrived at our cosmology. I'm open to the fact that it could change. I don't expect it to change that much, because I feel like I drastically, wiped the slate clean so that I was able to come to much more solid foundations and conclusions. So I don't expect it to change much, but there could be something that is a revelation to me someday that then makes me change my view on something else. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, I think that comes from like what we just said, not putting your own cosmology on a pedestal and thinking it's better than everybody else's, because then you're constantly having to defend it. And what we say is the truth needs no defense. So if it's true, it'll all come out in the wash. And if we're wrong, hopefully we figure it out and we could adjust from there, and we don't have to keep making the same mistakes. And something I was going to say about if you put me on a pedestal earlier, it reminds me of the scene in Lord of the Rings. I know it's weird that I make a Lord of the Rings reference,
You always
where
do.
Frodo offers the ring to Galadriel, and Galadriel says, "If you give me the ring in place of a cruel tyrant, meaning Sauron, in place of an evil dark master, you'd have a beautiful queen." And she just like goes into this evil, crazy queen, that'll destroy and wreak havoc, and everyone will bend to me. It really reminds me of that, because giving her the ring is kind of like putting her on a pedestal and giving her the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate power, right? Giving her the ultimate power over your own choice. You just give it to somebody else, like you see a lot in religions and different dogmatic things.
Holy smokes. Wow.
It's the same thing. So that's why, guys, I know you love me and you think I'm great, but I'm not perfect. And if enough people put me on a pedestal, no matter what I tried, I might turn into, this crazy person. I mean, it's not saying I would, but it just the idea of that. And I think that's also highlighted well in the Dune series with Paul Atreides, because he, if you watch the movie or
Does
read
he
the
fall prey
books,
to that? I haven't read it.
he doesn't fall prey personally, but it gets after he takes the power and wins the fight that in the movie. And I don't know, I haven't really watched the movies, but after the part where he gets the Fremen together and takes over and gets knocks out the Emperor and all that stuff. After that, this jihad is unleashed on the entire universe, and all these Fremen go out fighting in his name, and basically going to all these planets and killing people and putting them under his rule. But there's really nothing he can do to stop it. It's really amazing. So
Oh, smokes.
we don't want to overshare in jihad, even though that's the terrible use of that word jihad, because jihad is really about an inner battle. Anyway, so it's funny how these words, right? We're going to talk about that too, about how words affect people. So that's just something we want to say in the beginning and kind of give you guys a little brief overview of what the Oversharing Show started as and what it is now. It's like that meme we talked about, like how it started, how it's going. We should make a meme and put our first one up, like how it started, and then put a picture of like this art, like how it's going.
I don't know
um
what the memes what the pictures would entail though. Anyway.
Yeah, it will be like us starting like all nice and smiley, and then we'd be like, ah, and the other pictures like the realm, man, we're energy, dude. So all right. So we talked about what our show is about, and let's see, where are these notes? Okay, so one of the things that we wanted to talk about is we get a question, and a lot of people have this question. It's like about good versus evil and stuff like that. And we're not trying to create another religion or a set of beliefs here on the Oversharing Show, the Church of Oversharing. I mean, that's just that would go against everything we believe in. So, we're like we said, we're just making observations like blind men in a room feeling an elephant. We're all gonna have uh a different explanation of what we feel. Like I hope I have the trunk. That's my joke. Like I'm holding something here. It's the elephant. I know it's his trunk. It's dark in here. I really hope it's his trunk. That's a elephant dick joke, everybody. That was anyway. See the silly humor we bring here to the Oversharing show. But the way that, so a lot of people talk about like relative truth and absolute truth and good. Is there really good? Is there really evil? These people are evil. There's good and evil. And Sharon and I have been having discussions about this. And what we came up with is that I think there's different levels of perception of this. This goes kind of like we were talking about with the different words like jihad. The English language is crazy because I have this picture in my head and I'm trying to describe it to people and I'm using these words of the English language, but these words are so interchangeable that they can mean different things to somebody else. So it creates a different picture in someone else's head. And it's a way that they're kind of misunderstanding what I'm saying. And this happens all the time. I've watched it happen my whole life. I just never realized it or been able to enunciate it until now. So what we're going to do is try to dig into the nitty gritty and explain exactly what we mean by all these things. And I've said this like a lot about words, and this is why I prefer symbols, because symbolism is a way for people to get their own interpretation and get something out of it without having to speak words, So
Yeah.
anyway,
That works for people who are prone to that. I'm like way more logical. So for me, I feel like words are more helpful sometimes.
oh yeah, no, words could
No,
be.
I'm just telling you because like even like tarot has been difficult for me. I really have to like practice and I don't practice that often, so I don't know all the cards or anything like that. But like, yeah, I have to do it enough to get the feel for the symbolism and what the archetypes are and what they mean and stuff like that. So, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
I hear what you're saying.
100%. And I was I had another show which we're probably going to start doing it again. I think I've been talking to my great friend Ashley. It's called the Terrible Podcast, TAROTBULL.com. Check it out. We covered every single card in the deck for at least an
Okay, I
hour,
haven't
hour and a
even
half.
listened to.
And no problem. But it was for me, it was good because it was basically like a self-teaching learning course, right? To learn all this
Yeah.
stuff. And I guess what I should have said about symbols versus words, a claim I could probably make is symbols are maybe a better way to preserve knowledge and pass it down because they're harder to corrupt. Not that you can't corrupt symbols, but the corruption of symbols usually happens when you invert them, like a pentagram, and everyone thinks it's evil and it's the devil and stuff. But then you could look at maybe another representation of the pentagram, which just means, you have the 5-pointed star upside down. So you have the 4 elements above spirit, which is the top one. And then when you turn it the other way, you have that point, which is spirit on top in its proper place for everything to be in harmony and balance, I guess. But to have a true balance, I guess you have to have it go both ways, right? It's like a yin and yang situation. So I think symbols are a better way because it's less corruptible. I mean, look at the Bible, how many people have used it to control people and to corrupt people and stuff like that. Or again, those people allow themselves to be corrupted. So it's not like
No one's forcing anyone
we're not
to.
getting into victim here. But yeah, so so the first thing we want to talk about were with the whole good and evil thing, right? I think there's different levels of perception, and that's what gets people tripped up. And until recently, I haven't really been able to enunciate this in a way that makes sense to more people. Well, we're hoping this makes sense to more people, but I think it's good to look at these concepts in 2 different ways. One way would be the physical, and one's the spiritual. So it's basically the seen and the unseen, or esoteric and exoteric, or external and internal. So the external is the physical world and the internal is the spiritual world. For sake of argument, we're not like defining terms absolutely here. This is just for our sake of explaining it. This is what we came to believe. So the physical, The exterior, that's the esoteric. The spiritual, the inner, that's the esoteric. And I wrote a great blog post about that. You could check out on morelawsmoreproblems.com in about 2019 or so. So go read that. Maybe we'll put a link below if you want further clarification on that subject between what esoteric and exoteric the differences are. So if you look at good and evil on the physical plane, or there's two different things, right? Something happens out in the world. Somebody kills somebody. Somebody does something maliciously and hurts somebody. You could say that's evil in the physical realm, right? Because in the physical realm, we're thinking about the golden rule and treating others the way we want to be treated. Because in the physical, we're interacting with others. In the spiritual, it's really just internal, so it's ourselves. But spoiler alert, it does connect to everybody because we have this collective consciousness that we're dealing with. And I think that is kind of a symptom of the fact that when some people say we are all one, we're just all one, I think that's kind of what that's hinting at. And when we say we're all one, what we mean is
in the
getting
spiritual realm.
In the spiritual realm, in the unseen, in the non-physical. So here in the physical, we incarnate to have this lovely experience so we can
be individuals and experience each other
and have free will, right? So we can experience all these things in the physical, all these trials and tribulations and even great times, this back and forth swing of the pendulum, the good times and the bad times, and it affects everything that we do. But on the spiritual plane, I feel that we are all part of the same energy, the same, whatever it is, we are all one. Now, that's the spiritual way to look at it. The physical way to look at it, if you're looking at something spiritually like that tenant, but from a physical mind frame, I think that's where the new age comes in. And that's where the new age gets you, because they'll say, oh, yeah, we're all one. Just sit around and meditate all day. Everything's great. You don't have to do anything. Everything's perfect. Peace and love and all that. Where I think if you take that mindset of everything's okay, peace and love, and you put it internally, and when you see things happen in the external world, you have this internal,
Peace.
castle, you call it, this structure of strength. And you know that no matter what happens, God has a plan for it. He created it all. There's some reason it's happening. Now, this doesn't mean that in the physical realm, you don't have to fight against somebody who's trying to hurt you or defend yourself or stick up for somebody.
Or even condone behavior that is against the golden rule.
Exactly.
But in the spiritual, you can forgive that person because forgive them for they know not what they do.
Yes. And to break that down, great point, Sharon. And to break that down to its essence, all that means is that you're not viewing yourself as a victim to what's going on in the physical internally. Even if you're a victim of somebody coming to rob your house and trying to murder you and all these terrible things, you could defend yourself. But like we always say, you don't have to get in a rage about it. You don't have to get mad. You could think to yourself, forgive them for they know not what they do. And I think that in the story, in the Bible, the story where Jesus dies, and that's his last thought when he dies, I think that whoever wrote that or whatever that was, whoever wrote that down and wanted to either remember it or whatever, make that a huge point. I think that because it was at the point of his physical death, we should really take a look at that. And it's like a valuable lesson. It's like a parable hidden in there, So if you can look at everything, even at the point of death where you're not blaming other people for it, you just see it all as God's plan internally. You could still be fighting for your life on the outside and the external, right? I think that is the proper way to distinguish it and to explain what we're talking about. And maybe hopefully people will get what we're saying. So let me just check. Go ahead if you have something to say. I was going to check the notes.
No, I think the next topic would be the natural law and the golden rule and using that as a guide.
Yeah. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, so even like the Bible will talk about how you're born with this internal knowing of right from wrong. And if we look at Romans, I'll read the quote in Romans 2:15. It says, they show that the essential requirements of the law are written in their hearts, and their conscience, which is their sense of right and wrong, their moral choices, bearing witness, and their thoughts alternately accusing or perhaps defending them. So that's basically saying, inside of you, your internal, when you've done something wrong, because you feel it. You may defend yourself. You may say, no, that's not what I was doing. That's not what I was thinking. You may gaslight people and tell them, no, you're wrong about me. That's not what I was doing. But internally, that you did something with an intention that was perhaps negative, shall we say. So, and the Bible even says it, that you're born with this internal knowing. So, that natural law, that golden rule is literally written in your heart, which means it's basically baked into your consciousness, your conscience too,
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like when people are out there in the physical, living their life, and they are going against the golden rule a whole bunch, there's this voice inside that might be telling them, like their inner conscious and their intuition, tell them not to do these things or whatever, or maybe try something else or all this stuff. But because of their focus on the external, they're kind of ignoring this internal voice, and it becomes a lot quieter. As like I was saying earlier, and then the opposite could be true too. If you're too focused internally, you could not be listening to your ego, and something can happen to you because you don't realize a car is coming down the street because you're too far in your head and you get hit by a car or something like that, So I think it really is a balance. And that kind of brings me to what karma is, because this is another thing I wrote an article about years ago about karma, because I feel like the mainstream understanding of karma is a direct cause and effect. Like, say if Sharon goes out and she's a meanie to a bunch of people and does all this thing, that all these bad things are going to happen back to her.
Someone's going to be mean back to me at some other future point.
Yeah, like if you steal someone's bike, someone's going to steal your bike or something like that. And I think that's more of the physical revenge side of it, right? People are like, yeah, they get their proper comeuppance and they have to deal with what I went through and how dare they. But I think more the way that karma works, or this, people have labeled it karma, is that the way I described it in my article was it's kind of like a pond, and somebody tosses a stone and now you have waves. And so everything is going to be affected. And then those waves are going to be affected by other waves, and things are just going to keep going back and forth until it kind of settles and it's all calm again. So I don't think it's directly a direct cause and effect, but I think what happens is when you're living not in accordance with the golden rule, that you're on a lower vibration. And when you're on this low vibration, I think your behavior is affected by it also. You kind of just go along. It's like evacuating your cockpit. I've heard of that before, where you don't take personal responsibility for things around you. You kind of just let things happen to you, and you're going along kind of blindfolded in life to all these other things. So you might attract all these negative things to you because you're in this negative state. And we're just feeling an elephant and trying to describe it, but I feel like that's how this realm works. It's not a direct cause and effect, but you're still causing the problems and things that are happening to you because of your vibration, because of your own actions and your own views on yourself. So I feel like if you know that, and then you start living in accordance with the golden rule, and the only way to really do it is, you could try to be a tyrant to yourself and get mad and punish yourself and judge yourself when you don't live up to your own standards of following the golden rule. But what's really worked for me is doing bad things, right? Evil, quote unquote, bad things, until I was just sick of them, until I realized that it wasn't the answer. I was just trying to fill this hole that I had in my soul or whatever with all these random sexual experiences with women. until I got to a point where it wasn't enough. And I know I've talked to many addicts that say the same thing, drugs or, whatever, sports or gambling or all these things. I mean, I guess sports, but like gambling and all this stuff.
Whatever escapism of your choice, pick
Yeah.
it.
I mean, it
That's the
could really
one.
be anything, any kind of escapism. You do it until you realize that it's just not doing it for you anymore.
Fulfilling.
It's
Yeah.
not fulfilling. It's not scratching that itch. And then you have this moment of clarity where you're like, oh my God, I was wrong. And that's the key. So when you admit you were wrong and you really feel it in your soul, in my case anyway, I wanted then to not do that bad behavior anymore. And sometimes I had to fight against certain things, but I always said to myself, like, this is even to this day, I'll see like a woman walking down the street that's attractive. And I'll just think to myself, like, even if we talk and we hook up and all this stuff, like it's not going to lead anywhere. It's just going to lead to a dead end and me being like, ah, fuck, not again, like one of those things. So now I'm choosing to I'm happily choosing to walk the golden rule. I keep wanting to say the golden path because that's in Dune.
Oh,
The
that's
golden
funny.
path. Yeah, the God
The
Emperor.
golden path is following the golden rule.
Yeah. Well, the way that they use it though, it's
It's
a lot
different.
different. But anyway, yeah, it's
Different.
still funny, but I keep wanting to say it because yeah. So but anyway, so me desiring to walk the path of the golden rule, it comes from me. That's what I want to do now. I like actively want to do it. So there's none of this denial or none of this wondering why. And I feel like sometimes you have to go back into it. I know it's funny because Ram Dass tells this story, and again, we don't put anybody on a pedestal. We just take what we like and leave the rest. But he tells this story of how he was a vegetarian for a very long time. And then he realized he was just being phony with it. Like he was using it like he
As a
was
way
better
to
than,
elevate himself, maybe think his ego, like, oh, I'm a vegetarian.
yeah, oh, look at these idiots eating. I'm a vegetarian. I'm not causing any harm. So he just like went to this Chinese restaurant and ate a bunch of spare ribs. So I
And
think sometimes,
then
right? Yeah, and then he bumps into this guy who is was admiring the way that Ram Dass
they
kind of like blessed his food and showed thanks, and he was asking him all this stuff, and then he was like, "What's your diet like?" He asked Ram like, what?" And then he was like sitting there in front of all these like bones from the spare ribs, like,
yeah, I'm a vegetarian deciding to eat meat
yeah,
again for the first time just to break my vegetarian ego.
yep. He was like, "You're looking at it like this is what I eat now." But I think that is important. It shows, it highlights a very important thing, which is sometimes you're not done. You got to do it till it's done. And again, it's not like we're telling people to go out and do bad things, but
Some
and
people's
hurt other
escapism
people.
is like drinking too much coffee. Like that was my escapism. So I was spending all this money on going to the coffee shop every day. This was like several years ago. And because I was escaping something that I didn't want to face, I was running away from these feelings of discomfort in the relationship I had. And so my way of escape was to go to a coffee shop, order a drink, and have my, and that was my, like, that's my thing. That's what I do. There's nothing wrong with this. I can have my guilty pleasure. I'm just drinking coffee. But yeah, I had to do that till I was done with it and face whatever it was I needed to face, which
Exactly.
took years.
1,000%. And now you realize what it is, so you could still go enjoy some coffee if you want, but you don't have to get wrapped up in it or defend it or say, coffee's not bad, or just get encamped and involved in all this division because of it. You
Right.
learned your lesson and you realized you were wrong and you moved on.
And now I only drink 3 to 4 ounces a day and I'm cool. Like, doesn't, I'm cool with it. I just like the flavor.
Yeah,
But something you were saying earlier about the like being in a lower vibration just reminds me of some of the stuff that we've talked about before. But like when you're in this like low vibe spiritually, right? Because we're spiritual beings wrapped up in this like 3D body, right? Physical
allegedly.
body, allegedly. So your vibration, your energy because you are energy is how I see things, um, will affect the people around you and the things around you. So could it be that because of your low vibe, you will attract the negative energy to you? So negative circumstances will happen upon you because you're having this negative vibe. And maybe it's to wake you up from the negative vibe that you're having, so that you notice, maybe you notice, and
Yeah.
maybe you look at it and say, oh, because people always ask, why did this happen, right? Like I do that. If something happens, I now, whenever something in my body is like off, like, oh, my shoulder or my neck or my leg or my head, I now start looking at it as, okay, the chakras, and like I don't have a lot of info on this, but I have the card that Eileen McCusick made of the body, the biofield, and like where in the body, what things mean for like where, when things are not going right in the body. So I'll think of that and I'll just be like, what in that area is causing something? Like, I think your left shoulder is like sadness and grief and loss. So if your left shoulder's hurting, maybe you've experienced that and you're not acknowledging it, you're not letting it go in a good way. You're holding it back or something. But like, that's how I look at things now when something happens in my body or whatever, and I'm like, okay, what am I not noticing that I need to notice, that I need to address? So I see things like that too with something happening. Like if, like, one time I was like, this was before I met Cody, but like a couple of years ago, I was talking to this dude, and I I was talking to him on like FaceTime type thing, and I was washing dishes and I dropped a glass, and I never drop stuff and break it. Like that's just not something that happens. So to me, it was like probably telling me this guy's not good, like what's going on. And the crazy thing was, like, within days of that happening, the whole thing just fell apart. Like the whole, whatever it was that we were trying to maybe be in a relationship or something, but whatever was going on there just fell apart, never materialized, because there was a lot of negative energy there with that person. And so like when I dropped that glass, that to me was like, what are you doing? What's going on? Like, but at the time I didn't see it. It was only after that had ended that I went back and looked and thought to myself, that never happens. I never do that. Like, so that was like a wake up. Like, so whenever something like that happens now, I think, okay, why did this happen? I don't do it sometimes we want to do it in a very like victim-y way, right? But I try to not do that. I'm like, okay, don't be victim. Like, but why did this happen? Because clearly something like this happened. God's trying to tell me something. What is God trying to tell me? So even if I have to cry it out and be like, God, please show me, what are you trying to tell me with what just happened? Because it doesn't feel right, doesn't feel good. Anyway, that was a side story that I never meant to talk about. Sorry. I
No, that was
overshared.
great. That was perfect, because I think a lot of that, it goes back to what we were saying about the vibrations and these little signs that happen in our life. And if you start to read the signs, I think that's kind of the positive use of divination or whatever, right? Whereas if you're trying to figure out the lotto numbers or the future and all this stuff for your own personal gain, that's where it could go negative. But it'll work. It'll still work for you, perhaps. Could it be
But
you
it'll
could
lead you
still,
down
like,
more.
escapism, right?
Yeah.
But instead you sit back, and it's like if you were a mariner years ago and you didn't have like Doppler radar to tell you if there was going to be a storm. You'd look at the signs. Are all the animals like burrowing and hiding right now? Like, what's going on? Does everything just seem a little, it's calm, but it just seems a
Is it
little
really
off?
quiet? Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a storm coming now? It's the same kind of thing. And I think dropping a glass like that is perfect, especially if it's something you don't normally do. Now, I always knock things over, so that might not be a sign for me, but that's
Yeah.
why we're individuals. And when you get to know yourself, then you know the signs. There's different
Mhm.
signs that I have. I might see an owl perhaps, like I did the other day.
Yeah.
Um,
I
you
need
know,
to look
these,
up what that means.
yeah, they could all, it's all signs, you know. I know what it was. It was the owl going, dude, your show is the shit. And I'm like, owl, listen, you know, he was like, your show's
Stop putting
awesome.
me
I'm
on
like,
a pedestal, owl.
exactly, owl. I'm just flesh and blood. I mess up too. It's funny. It's fine. Get to know yourself, owl. No. So yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought that up because I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about and stuff. And you know, every person has their own journey, right? And draws their own conclusions. That's something we wrote in the notes, and I think it's applicable right now. It's so true. But we're basically just describing our own journeys too, and maybe you can
Yeah.
glean something from it. You know, a lot of people
Yeah.
that watch this show, I feel like they know about these things and they have an idea of it, but I feel like us reiterating it and talking about it could explain it to new people and then also validate other people who are feeling the same way.
Yeah.
So it's great. But
One thing I
God,
wanted to add just
please
before we
do.
move on to the next topic is how I've come to see things and how I use for myself in trying to explain as well to others, but how I use natural law or the golden rule, however you want to say it, as like a dividing line. That's like my measure of, you know, when people say, is it good or is it evil? And of course, we're still speaking of the physical realm, right? Um, so, um, but I also see that intention, like your intention is the key. And the intention is your spiritual, right? It's like that comes from your spirit. Like, are you intentionally being um wishing harm upon someone? I mean, it doesn't even have to be that. It could just be that you're being um maybe avoidant or something. Like for example, if I say something to someone, if I say it to them with my intention to help them, it's different than if I say it with an intention to make myself feel better. So in sometimes this can even like how you say it carries your intention too. But it really is the golden rule. You can apply it outside by like, okay, because the natural law, the golden rule is kind of like if you harm someone, right? If you do harm to someone else. But harm isn't necessarily just like physically hitting someone or stealing their property. It could also be like an intention when you say something to them. Because like even Jesus said, like that it comes from the intentions of your heart. Like if you, he said something to the effect of like, yeah, you maybe didn't sleep with this woman, right? But in your heart, you already desired to sleep with her. So you've already done that right here in your mind. So it's the intention. And so that's like the spiritual side of it. So you can apply the golden rule physically and spiritually, but the spiritual part comes from your intention, like your free will, kind of like your free will outside is the external, on the internals like your intention. So like I just thought of that right now, so I haven't fleshed it out, but that's how I see it right now.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think the other side of that coin would be applying the golden rule internally is are you acting like a victim? You know, that's the other side of free will that we talk about so much, which is simply your choice how you're going to feel about something in the moment when it happens. You know, I was listening to Rodney Norman, my friend and comedian Rodney Norman, this morning. He was doing a live and he was talking about because people were asking him how he maintains like an optimistic kind of view, and he says he's like, you know, when something happens to me, he's like, I don't view it as good or evil. I just view it as something that happened. And then I don't ask myself why this happened. I just say, oh, this happened. Now, what can I do? Or what can it show me? Or, you know, all these questions that he asks, but he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't go into a victim narrative in his head, which I really
Mm-hmm.
like. And I think that is super important. And it's a gift that we're given, this free will. So why not use it? And why not use it in a way where we don't look like victims? You know, because if you think about the golden rule, do not do unto others as you would have done yourself, and then also do not do unto others. You wouldn't want people out there acting like a victim around you. So why would you act like a victim to yourself? Did I say that right? That makes sense, right?
Something like that.
You guys get it. If you've been watching long enough, you know the way I scat. I'm just scatting everybody. Yeah, it's something I was listening in the show because we're recording this right after our woodshop episode,
Stream.
woodshop the wise streamed, and I was speaking and I was talking about, I don't remember what it was, but I'll think of it. And then I remember saying it and I'm like, oh, that came across great. And then listening to it, I'm like, oh, I was
That
kind of
didn't come
scatting in the middle there. So, guys, read between the lines, you'll get it. But that's the cool thing about having a show too, is because every week we could talk about these things and flush them out even more, especially this new idea that Sharon just popped up. And let me tell you, she's pretty strict by the notes. So when she freestyles, I love it. We're just freestyling, everybody.
Yeah, we're freestyling.
Yeah, but thank you for
Good.
sharing that because I think that's very important stuff about the way you view this golden rule internally and in the intentions, because they do say the path to hell is paved with good intentions, but I feel like what you're talking about gets you around that because it's not really about good or bad intentions. It's more about true or false intentions, right? Are you truly going by what your heart's telling you, or are you going along what you think you should do to save everybody when you should be looking in the mirror, maybe, right? And saving yourself, perhaps. And that kind of brings us neatly to our next topic, which we were going to talk about truth. What is the truth? I once heard somebody define truth by saying the only thing that you can actually point at to true truth is things that have happened because they've already happened, so they're true, right? But even that stuff, open any history book and you could see how that gets distorted with words, right? But what we're talking about though mostly with truth is just like we said before about the perception with the physical and the spiritual. One person's truth could be different from another person's truth. It's just because on the physical realm, when things happen, people are going to base what they believe on as true by all the experiences, everything that's ever
And
happened to them,
memories,
and their memories and what they've
which
been
can
through.
fault, can fault, your memory can fault. Like just like we talked about in the Mandela effect episode, like your memory can fail you and you'll remember something differently than someone else remembered it. Like even when when you have officers, policy enforcers going to the scene of an car accident, they're like, well, who was doing what? Everybody sees something different and notes and writes something different down. So that is their perception. And to them, it's true. They don't think they're lying. And it's not lying because that is what they saw. That's what they remember they saw. So how can you tell someone that they're lying when they're just telling you what they saw, right?
And they're expressing their perception of what they saw. So you're exactly right. And I'm glad that you brought that up about memory because I was hiking the other day and I was with my wonderful woman and we were talking about dreams. And something hit me about dreams because if something happens in the past, an experience, you have this memory. But what if you have unconscious dreams about that too that might mingle in with that memory? And then
Yes.
you're not exactly sure what happened because I know sometimes a lot of dreams could be very lifelike. And then if you don't consciously remember that dream, it could seep into your conscious memory and perhaps alter it. And then you got a Mandela effect, and
Absolutely.
all of a sudden we're running around with the Berenstain Bears.
Absolutely. And the crazy thing about that is I was talking to people about that recently, like within the last several months, how some people will ask me, "Oh, like, have you ever been on an air balloon?" And I'm just like, I think I have, but I'm not sure. Like, I have this like vague memory that I've been on a hot air balloon, but like I don't have any pictures or like I don't know how old I was. You know what I mean? And I'm like, did I dream that I was? Did it really happen? I don't know. I don't.
Or was it a past life? And
Right.
by saying that, I could clarify what I was saying on the woodshop episode, which is this crazy topic that's another division is reincarnation. You know, some people think we have one life, we live it, we die, that's it. Some people think we live multiple lives. My idea is a little more nuanced, where I, again, going back to the spiritual, where we are on the spiritual plane all one because we're just energy, right? And we're tricked into this physical experience. So our energy, this energy has probably experienced everything in the past. So it's possible that because we are connected to it, we could feel this like it was our life. And maybe that is how we learn our lessons. And
Or
then,
we channel it.
we channel it. And then we're here in this exact
The heck was that
physical.
noise?
You all
Holy
right?
shit. That was a weird noise. It creeps me out. I'm all right. Sorry.
It's my dragon over here. Calm down, dragon. Um, no, it's funny. It's
Lost
great.
my train of thought. Go ahead. Keep going.
Anyway, guys, go to morelawsmoreproblems.com. Click on the Oversharing tab. We're just going to run a commercial here to cover it. Uh,
Oh,
wow, look at you. Maybe it was an angel.
yeah.
Go back to our
Yeah.
last episode. Angel. Oh, that was
Oh
crazy.
my gosh. Dude. Yeah. Did you hear a sound? Did
No,
you make a sound? Did something I heard a sound come through. That was so weird.
maybe it was my angel speaking to you or telling me to shut up. You're
When
spilling
I
too much
said
beans, Brandon.
it was when I said channeled. Could it be that it was channeled?
Ooh, I like it. Yeah, it could totally be that it was channeled. And
Wow.
so but what I was saying
And
before
makes
is,
me think about epigenetics too. Sorry to interrupt you.
oh no, yeah,
But
go ahead.
like, right? Epigenetics is like they have no scientists allegedly have no way to explain epigenetics because they can do something to some mice, right? And then those mice will have it'll freak them out. They're afraid of whatever happened to them. Then those mice will have babies that'll have babies. And like generations later, the babies still are afraid of whatever happened to their great great grandparents because it's in their energy field, perhaps. Could it be? Because it wasn't in their genes. They didn't find it in their genetic code. It's just somehow made its way through without passing through the DNA, allegedly, whatever DNA is.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like it could all be related.
It could all be related. And what that means is now you could fit in the people who have this idea that we only live one life and the people that have this idea that we reincarnate. It overlaps and there's a mesh, and it kind of makes sense where there are these two camps fighting,
And we
and
don't have to fight about that.
and the truth is somewhere in the middle, speaking of
Mm-hmm.
truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, that's great. And I feel like that is what maybe is how this happens. So that those past lives of the people that came down before us are somehow still a part of us, and we feel that maybe we did live that in some way because our energy and our consciousness did live through that. But now in this particular incarnation, especially because we have this veil of forgetfulness, so we can't directly consciously experience those past experiences, or have knowledge of them or whatever, or know them truly, right? We just have this unconscious knowing of them. So because of that, now we have a chance to take everything that happened before us, and we have a way to conquer it in a new way. We get like a fresh slate to go into the world to build upon that unconscious knowledge. And the only way we could really feel it is internally, right? It's an intuition that guides us because of all the things that happened in the past. So you guys don't have to argue about reincarnation or not anymore. We just solved it. Thank you guys very much. All right, that's the end of our show. No, I'm just kidding. Now back to your regular scheduled programming. Yeah, so I think that's what I wanted to say on the woodshop episode. But anyway, I digress. Back to truth. Yeah, so physical and spiritual truth, right? So like you could say, yeah, this stove is hot, and you could touch it in the physical, and and you get the knowing that it's hot, right? And that's something that's a little different. But I like what you said though about the whole memory thing, because I think that plays into this perfectly. It's just another way. If you shift it a little bit, you could see how truth is very slippery. And I think what happens is people get attached to their truth, and then they have this internal truth and they want it to be everybody else's truth. And that's when the bickering and arguing and all that stuff could start, or the
Yeah.
insecurity, you know.
Yeah. When we were talking about this before the show about like my truth versus your truth, um, we were talking about how could it be that this is applicable in the spiritual realm? Like, because in the physical realm, like you can have objective truth. Like you said, this stove is 100 degrees. Well, by the standards that we've created called whatever, Kelvin, Celsius, whatever, Fahrenheit, you could say, yes, this stove is 150 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever. Right. So you can have those like standards of measurement and stuff like that, and you can call that. But in the spiritual realm, it's not so cut and dry, right? So anyway, you take it away.
Take it away, Brandon. No, yeah, you're right. Exactly. It really isn't as so cut and dry. And that's why it's so nuanced. And we're just, attempting to explain what we think it could be. We're not like making claims, right? That's why we always say that, because we really don't know. There's some things we don't know. We might have a good picture of it, but the example we were going to use is in the physical reality, in the physical there, how there's no objective truth is murder, right? So in the physical realm, it's wrong to do murder. It goes against the golden rule. In the spiritual realm, though, we don't know God's plan. Now, again, this isn't like a justification for you to go out and murder somebody now, listener, over Sharonite slave. No.
But if you're
Don't.
observing, let's say you're observing that a
We're
murder
just
happened.
observing it. You see something happen and you're like, that's evil. That's totally evil what happened, right? But the thing is, in the spiritual realm, we don't know God's plan.
Right.
Maybe,
And hold on, let me just interject too.
please
That
do.
people will say, not only is the situation evil, but they will say that man is evil for doing that, right? When that man is just experiencing what that man is experiencing. And like, who are you to judge? Like, Jesus didn't judge that man for murder because he didn't judge sinners and murderers and women who were, what did he call them? Street
Prostitutes?
women. Yeah, prostitutes.
Streetwalkers?
He hung out with them, type of thing.
Yeah.
So
How dare
anyway, sorry, I had to just throw that in there.
How dare you, Jesus? No, thank you for that. That was amazing. I love when you interrupt. You always have a great nugget of wisdom to share. You don't have to. I mean, it's the Oversharing show. You don't have to apologize for oversharing, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So going back to the example of murder. So you see a murder occur, but in the spiritual realm, we don't know God's plan. Maybe there's a reason that consciousness had to experience committing that murder, and then the other consciousness had to experience getting murdered to later set something right that we don't understand. You know, maybe the person they killed was going to go on to kill more people. You can even look at it that way. I mean, that's kind of not always true, but not that that's just a justification for murder, everybody. Again, we're just saying as an observer sitting back, so this way you don't have to feel like a victim. You don't have to point fingers and think everybody's evil. We're not saying that you go out and have breakfast with this murderer guy and make him your hero. Not at all. You could still, on the physical realm, keep your distance, set up your boundaries, and even fight back if this person's coming at you. But what we're saying is, since we are mere physical beings in this incarnation and in this realm, we can't grasp the scope of the creator and his whole plan of everything that's going on. And this kind of reminds me, like when I was in I wish I could go back to little Brandon in the born again Christian speaking tongues thing. And because people would say, why did God have to kill my dad? Or why did he have to take my cousin or whatever it was? And I never felt that, and I could never fully enunciate that. And I was like, well, God doesn't really kill people. He kind of just set everything up and then everything just happens. He's like a casual observer, I guess you could say, on the side of his own creation. I mean, I don't know if I said that right, but anyway, I was kind of looking at it in that way. And now we're able years later to break it down on the Oversharing show. So thank you, Sharon. But yeah, so we don't know, right? We don't know the whole plan of God. So
And could it be that person who died that their children or their spouse or whatever had to experience that to learn something else, right?
And go on to do greater things. Like that
Right?
lady that we heard about that was terribly had these bad things happen to her, and she had things done against her will sexually, like a gang rape thing happened, and then she turned around to make this whole foundation for women that could come and get help and all this stuff. So she was able to turn her negative experience into this overwhelming positive experience, because if you think about it, it is all just energy. Even when people say something too negative or do something too bad or give you their attention, which I think is the ultimate form of energy in this realm, is our attention. So whenever they give you your attention, if it's a bad thing, you could take that energy and somehow transmute it.
Transmute it. It's jinx.
Sync, jinx sync. You could transmute it and use a true alchemy to turn it into something better. So that's what we mean when we talk about truth. And if there is objective truth, or I don't know if I'm saying that right, but if there is an eternal truth or not. And I think what happens is a lot of different religions and movements, such as the New Age, which we're going to talk about next, somehow these truths, they're like half truths that are embedded in there. Like Christianity, for example, the story of Jesus. I said it last week with Nick, good old woodshop. I was like, the story of Jesus is this perfect
Example.
exactly on how to guide your behavior in your life. But other people have used it for control, you know. And we don't have to beat that horse because everybody knows if they're watching what we're talking about. So anyway, the New Age, though, we should focus on that, because moral relativism is something that falls into this New Age trap. And I think what happens is they're confusing the physical with the spiritual. It's inverted. So in the New Age movement, they'll say all the same things we're saying. Everything's perfect. Look at the Tao. Talks about if you'd like to change the world, I don't think it could be done. The world is perfect. If you tamper with it, you'll ruin it. Something like that.
We mean that
And
spiritually. I think that's what the Tao meant.
yeah, it's talking probably spiritually. And then people in the New Age movement, maybe some nefarious figures, maybe they did it on purpose, maybe it was an accident, but they took these truths and they tried to apply it to
Apply
the
them to
physical realm
yeah.
and hide them, kind of like inject them in the physical realm, and then what happens in the New Age is, and I know this happened to me when I came across this stuff, because it was great. I was meditating all the time, and I was really able to cultivate this connection to my intuition. But I think after a while, I started to meditate too long, and I would just let things go. And I wasn't really working on myself anymore, because I was like, oh, it's all perfect. It's fine. We'll
And then
just
it
let
was
it
an
go.
egoic thing too, probably. I'm meditating. At
Yeah.
least I'm meditating. You're not.
Yeah, 100%. And I was like, everybody needs to meditate. It's going
It's
to
the
cure the
thing.
world. I was trying to get everybody to meditate, where, I mean, in this society, it might be true that a lot of people need to meditate. It could help you a lot. But again, I was like, this is what I found. And I'm making, I was like an evangelist, and I was like, it's going to save the world. Well, we can't always bat 1,000, right? I mean, sometimes. But yeah, so I think that's exactly what the New Age does. And they use the same terms that we would use, the same words, even some of the symbolism, and it just gets people get confused, and then they just like quit their job and they sit home all day, or they just keep going to like meditation retreat after meditation retreat, and they keep doing that, and they go too far in that realm, and then they become they stop evolving, and their consciousness stops elevating. There you go. Their consciousness doesn't rise anymore because they get stuck at this plateau. And I feel like that's a trap for anybody to look out for if you're trying to raise your consciousness and that's your goal, is to keep your eye on the prize, right? It's to raise your consciousness and not to
Do self work.
yeah,
That
do
will.
self work, not to get above the pack or to be better than other people because of it. But I mean, I think we really nailed it with that New Age thing, because it's been irking me for a while how to exactly put it into a nice, concise package of what the difference of my cosmology as opposed to the New Age. And I think that's a really concise way to put it. It's like, no,
Okay,
all
say
these
it
things,
again. Just
what I, t-
Put it
just to
nail
put
in
a
it.
nail in the coffin. Okay,
Yeah.
so all these ideas that we talk about, the world's perfect and everything's perfect and stuff, it's on the spiritual realm. We're trying to, when we say this, we're trying to kind of view things as God or the creator would view them, which we can't do. So again, it's unexplainable, but we just aren't being victims internally, right? It
Yeah.
just goes back to that where in the new age, they'll put all these great ideas we talk about and try to stick it in the physical. And that actually makes people victims though, because then they'll say, oh, it's everybody else that's doing it. It's all their fault. If everybody else meditated, this world would be perfect. If everybody else knew what I knew and followed the Buddha or whatever, this world would be perfect. Where it's so crazy how it's like genius. It really is this inversion. Um,
Yeah.
but
And
go ahead. Go
it
ahead.
makes me think of like, because I will explain things like in this way, and I'll say things like it doesn't matter. And now with that new lens of like it's in the spiritual realm, it makes more sense to me why it doesn't matter. So like in the physical, you can't really say it doesn't matter so easily, because things matter, because what is matter? And I credit my dear friend Spoons with this, because one time she sent in one of our group chats, she sent an audio message to everybody saying she was pondering about the word matter, and how when you say it matters or it doesn't matter, what does that mean? And she realized that matter is also matter. It's something that weighs something, right? It's matter because it has weight to it, right? So if there's weight to it, that's what makes it matter, right? But in the spiritual realm, you don't have matter, do you? Because you're
No,
just energy. You're a being of light, right? So you don't have that. Anyway, sorry, that was just my little
no,
tangent.
no.
That
I'm
was
glad you brought that up because I think we did talk about that when we were making the notes. And shout out to our beautiful friend Spoons, that beautiful human
soul.
soul. There you go. I don't want to say even that yeah, because I love the way that she sees things. It's really great, and she's a
Yeah.
powerful asset for us here on the Oversharing Show. She's one of the we have plenty of people that we're friends with that are like the. We used to talk about this a lot
Behind the
more.
scenes
There's a lot of behind the scenes people that are just killing it, and I like to give a
and
shout also.
contribute to our show.
Yeah, yeah, contribute to our show. And I like to give a shout out to our friend Joe, who's been on the show before, because he just gave us a nice little monetary donation every time he does from time to time. He gives us a little bit of money, which is really grateful. We're really grateful for it. And it's much appreciated. And if you'd like to do the same, you can go to morelawsmorproblems.com, click on that over Sharon tab, and there's several ways you could support us financially if you'd like. PayPal, Zelle, Cash App, Venmo. I mean, you could mail me something. I've had other people mail me. Actually, I just got a letter from Lore, and I got to check it out. She sent me a calendar that she made, and I haven't looked at the letter yet, because I just
I
got
need to
it.
go check my mailbox. I think I have something in the
Yeah,
mailbox.
so thank you so much, Lore. There's so many people that contribute to make us the Oversharing Show and what we are. So that's another reason not to put us on a pedestal, because people that just watch the show casually and stuff, they don't realize the work in the group behind us that's standing behind us. We're just the face of this, right? It doesn't mean we're all of this. We're just the face of what people get to see. So yeah, thank you guys so much. But anywho, exactly, matter doesn't matter. So
Yeah. So in the spiritual realm, I like to look at it like, I ask the question, okay, what what would God do about this situation? We could also say, what would Jesus do? I think that's why that phrase became very popular, right? What would Jesus do? But when Jesus is looking at a situation, he's not looking at the physical. Otherwise, he wouldn't have hung out with sinners, you know? So he's looking at it from the spiritual. He's looking at the intentions of your heart. He's looking at you deeply as a spiritual being, right? So when you say it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, to me, sorry, when I say it doesn't matter, I mean it in the spiritual sense. Because in the grand scheme of things, if I think to myself, if I were God and I were looking at all this and I see these two beings and one of them murders the other one, what would a parent do? right? If he said he has two children, like people, this happens all the time, right? Where a parent has like two children and one of them maybe murders the other one or something, right? On accident or maybe whatever, it doesn't matter, right?
Cain and
They,
Abel.
right? And how did those parents look down at their children? Did they say, I hate this one because he murdered the other one? No, you have to put boundaries. Yeah, I mean, Cain had to move out because they were like, no, that you ain't going to do that again, right? But they didn't. A parent isn't going to have hate for their children. A true parent spiritually can't have hate for their children for that, right? You have to look at it as from a God perspective. God loves all of us, every single last one of you, even if you're a sinner, right? So how, if God were to look at that situation, he wouldn't be like, well, I hate the murderer and I'm going to send him to hell, and this other one who got murdered is going to heaven. Like that's not how God would look at things, right? So I always think to myself, allegedly, like, how would God look at the situation? And that's why I say it doesn't matter, because those two people were just fulfilling their roles in this lifetime. And I can't put myself as a judge on them. That's why Jesus also said, like, he wasn't going to judge you. He wasn't going to judge you for something. And that's why, because he can't. We're all beautiful, amazing souls. And in that sense, in the spiritual sense, that's how we're all equal. So that's why you can't put people on pedestals, because it doesn't make any sense. Like if you were a parent and you have 5 children, you're not like, oh, I love the second child the best. That's the best kid. I mean, you shouldn't, probably. Maybe some people do. I don't know. I don't have children. But of the people that I know who have the children, they can't do that. They have to show love for each of their children in a way that is special to each one of them, but they're not going to say, I love this one better than the other one.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was also just.
Well, I could add to a little bit, because if you could say that the parent can hate the actions of that child or not
Right.
agree
That's the
with them
physical realm,
in the
right?
physical, but then also view them as a person, a spiritual being who had all these circumstances happen to them, which led them to this decision that was terrible, that they should have never done, but they could still have empathy for that person. And like you said, yes, they could still establish boundaries and maybe even get them out of their life if they have to, but they don't have to have that internal hate in for them, because I think that the hate consumes you. You know, I feel like whatever you actively hate, you're bringing yourself down to the vibration of that, because you're imagining yourself. I'll put it in my own example. If something happens to me and I get upset at somebody, I can imagine myself inflicting harm on them or whatever, and it feels good. And I'm like, yeah, I'd like to do that. You know, like if this guy pisses me off, I could go like key his car or something, you know, something silly. But I think though it brings you down to their level and their vibration. And whereas if you act in the
And that's why
physical,
it's vengeance is mine, saith the Lord.
exactly 100%, because we never know the correct punishment that's actually gonna get to that person. That's really gonna affect them in the way that they need to be affected in order to start
Learn
to
something
learn
from their
something
choices.
and elevate their consciousness. You could even break it down to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Let's see. So a couple other things we want to talk about as far as examples would be well, we talked about that. So, but did want to mention this is like internally versus externally. The external, you could view everything as perfect. There's nothing we can individually fix out there, right? There's nothing we could fix in the world. We can't fix it. But internally, we could do all kinds of work. We could work on ourselves. And really, if you boil that down to its true essence, it's just learning how to not be a victim in situations as they appear to you. And by that way, you're kind of improving the world in a funny way. It's like a funny uh I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but yeah, I just wanted to say that because I think it's really important to put a little pin on this external versus internal versus external thing. I mean, but anyway, another example would be like this 2020 nonsense that we experienced as we record almost exactly 3 years ago. That
The
happened.
day before 3/11.
Yeah, we're on 310 right now. 3/11, 2020, which is 222 months to the day to September 1, 2001. We'll just say that. It's crazy how this realm works, right? But so the people during that there's people who covered their smiling faces and then people who refused to cover their smiling faces, and they just had different perceptions of reality. You know, the people who were covering their faces, a lot of them thought they were helping people and they were doing good and they were saving the world and they were doing their part to stop all this crazy stuff that was going on. But then there was other people who had a different perception that realized it was all nonsense. Technically, could it be a tactic of control? You know, you could look at how these things, by covering your smiling face, you're not even protecting anybody from your quote unquote germs or viruses, because it goes through it just like mosquitoes go through a fence, right? You know, like a chain link fence. So, but there were just different perceptions, and both people in the physical realm had their own truth. And if you go up against that person and try to argue with them, trying to show them your point of view, they're not going to hear it because they think that they're saving the world and they think that you're going to kill their grandmother. So there's really no way to convince them. The only thing I see that worked for me after a while was to just empathize with these people and to see them as people who are trying to save others. Now, again, it doesn't mean that when I went to a store, I would cover my smiling face to make them feel better. You know, I would still do my thing and confront people if they came up to me and do what I had to do. But I inside didn't hate them anymore. You know, I wasn't like wishing physical bad things to happen or, you know, all this stuff. I just realized, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And if they figure it out, they're going to feel like total retards. Can you still say
Yeah.
that on YouTube? So, you know,
And that's I feel like that's the spiritual side, right? Their internal knowing what they think they know, right? Is that, oh, this is bad. I'm going to help people by doing this, that, and the other. And your perception is different, right? So that, I feel like that's very spiritual. And the reality of it was, could it be that it was all made up and they were being used as pawns and maybe
allegedly.
controlled or whatnot? Could it be? And that this thing wasn't even real. And even if it were, your body doesn't work that way, from what we've come to learn.
Well, we'll just
Allegedly.
say we haven't seen any evidence to that side of the story so far. There's a lot of claims coming out of that side, but not a lot of evidence.
Yeah. So if somebody says the truth of the matter is that there was no such thing, right? I'm just giving an example. That's
Yeah.
a physical reality question. And then the spiritual side is that what the people were, their perceptions were, and how they were thinking about those, about how they were doing things.
Yeah.
Sorry if that came out. I don't know if I was saying that correctly, but
No, I think I got the gist. Yeah, I do it all the time. Don't worry. Obviously, you're here. You know. So we also say absolute truth has more to do with principles that govern this realm. So if you want to point to anything as absolute truth, I think we could, but I think it's more of, like you're saying, spiritual things. You know, when stuff gets inverted, absolute truth versus subjective truth. And I, like we were saying before, I think it comes from us trying to perceive everything in this realm as physical when it's not a physical realm. It's technically a spiritual realm. If you zoom into your hand, I mean, any mainstream person will tell you, any mainstream scientist will say it's just molecules and buzzing around. If you keep going further, it's basically just all energy.
space,
Space, the
the
final
final
frontier.
frontier.
These are the
These are the
voyages
voyages.
of the Starship Enterprise. These are the voyages of the Starship over Sharon. We got the star card in the beginning. We are
Oh,
Starship.
there we go.
So when we try to define truth, we're trying to find a physical truth. And if we realize that it's not a physical realm, even though that's what our senses report to us and it manifests as a physical realm, we just don't quite understand it, right? Were you gonna say something?
No.
Oh, okay. So we don't understand the realm, thus we can't have a concrete physical truth, right? I guess except the past, right? Things that happen, but then, like we said before, people's perception gets screwed up through memory and all these other things. So it really is hard to point to a truth in the physical realm, at least externally. Internally, you could, and I guess that's more of the spiritual, but you could tailor your own actions to accord with the spiritual truth, the internal truth that you know, and then it manifests in the physical as a truth. But then again, other people, though, are perceiving it. So for their perception, it might not be true. And that's, again, what causes a lot of this division, right? But going back to what we were saying about the 2020 nonsense, all the people who were on the other side that were covering their smiling faces internally, they're probably not hearing their intuition as clearly. So they might reach a point where they do, and then realize that what they did was wrong. And then their decisions might weigh on them. Things that they did, if would they realize, say they convinced somebody to get an experimental medical serum and then somebody had a bad time because of it. Now they're going to feel guilty. And there's nothing that me or Sharon or, a person could dream up as a revenge, nothing worse than the revenge that God or the realm is going to give you, because now they're going to feel terrible. It might even feel worse than being hit or something. Think about if you do something that causes somebody else's death, you're going to feel so guilty about it. It's going to weigh on you terribly. So it's, I love it.
But
The vengeance is mine.
that's where it gets like very airy fairy, because you yourself said like you could do something wrong by having told someone to go get that experimental medical serum. But if we look at that word wrong and we look at it from, again, the bird's eye, God's perspective, was it wrong? No, it doesn't have a right or wrong,
Yes.
because
Yes.
the way God sees it, that was part of the plan that was meant to happen. That person could have said no, right? That person could have said, no, I'm not going to do what you tell me.
Of
No, I
course.
won't do what you tell me.
Yeah, exactly.
Then I'm going to do what you tell me
Yeah,
afterwards.
exactly. Raging with the machine.
Yes.
Raging for the machine should be called. No, you're exactly 100% right. And so that's another stage of spiritual growth and development. But if somebody's coming out of this idea or frame of mind where covering their smiling face was the right thing to do, and then they hit the next step and realize that maybe they fell for lies and they realize that they were spreading the propaganda, they're going to feel terrible until they reach that next step. And that feeling terrible is the worst revenge that anybody could plot for somebody. It's better to just let it happen naturally and let God or whatever do it to them, because then hopefully with that terrible feeling they have, they'll keep going, and then they could get to the next level and realize that it is all perfect on that realm. But also they're going to have the memory of, oh, I better be careful and not tell people what to do anymore, because I don't realize the power that I have over
Yeah.
people.
So quickly going back to like the topic of like moral relativism and what is right or wrong, right? Again, I feel like it comes from your intentions, right? But like, I just want to like summarize it. Like right or wrong, we have to look at it if we're talking about it are we talking physical realm or are we talking spiritual realm? In the physical realm, it really goes by intention, I think. And that's where some people might get bothered or upset. And if somebody were to ask me, for example, was it right or wrong for that guy to tell that woman to take the experimental medical serum? Was it wrong? I can't answer that because I don't know the intention of that person's heart. Right? That person knows if they intentionally did it because they knew that that was going to be harmful for the other person and they wanted to have that harm come upon that person, then I can say, yeah, that was wrong because they intended harm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes
Right?
total sense. And I think that's how you're looking at it spiritually. Now, if you're
Yeah.
looking at it physically, you could say, yeah, that was wrong. It caused that person's death and it was terrible. And that person would be right also. So on both levels, you're right. It's just
Right.
when you
Yes
confuse
and no.
yes and no. Yes
Yeah.
and no.
Yeah.
Or like we used to do in the car business, it would be like, no. Somebody asks you a question like, hey, you want to eat lunch? It's like, no. Exactly. Thank you, Sharon, for summarizing that at the end. I think that was much needed. So what we were talking
Did
about
did you want to
next.
talk about the hermetic principles?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. There's guides like the seven hermetic principles, which are universal truths. They contain truth. If we can find any truth in this realm, it has to do with rules like natural law or the golden rule, etc. Like as above, so below, cause and effect, polarity, hot versus cold. And that's just like perception, right? Some people are freezing cold when they're outside, and some people are fine and they're just warm and they're like, what are you talking about? It's not cold out here. Or like we people that always fight over the heat, we need to turn up the heat. No, we need to turn it down. It's too hot in here. It's too cold in here. Who's right? Right.
Exactly.
But I think that the seven hermetic principles are really a good way to look at some kind of physical truth where it's just like guidelines to this realm, like natural law. If you start living against the golden rule and natural law, yeah, you're going to vibrate to a lower vibration and you're going to attract these negative things, then they're going to start happening to you. And then the converse is true, which if you start to live in accordance with the golden rule, then you're going to elevate your consciousness and your vibration is going to go up and you're going to attract more positive experiences to you, or experiences that are going to be better
Not
for
only
you.
be healing to yourself, but potentially healing to others as well
Yeah,
around
and
you.
you could look at it in a really simple way too, because if we are just here to elevate our consciousness, then while we're walking the golden rule, we are elevating it. And then if we're not, all these things are going to keep happening to us. It's like going the wrong way down the highway, right? You're just going to be driving down the wrong way and all these cars are going to be coming at you and beeping and hitting you and all this stuff. And it's like swimming upstream. It's going to be a tough trip for you to go on. And then when you start living in accordance with the golden rule, it's more like going with the flow and going with the stream. Um, yeah. So let's see. Is there anything else with the golden rule? Yeah. I mean, we're basically saying all this stuff in our notes anyway. It's so good that we take these notes though, because it just ingrained. It's like when you go for a test and you take notes and you study them and stuff, like you don't always exactly say everything that's in the notes, but you're able to express yourself better. I know I'm able to express myself better when we do these notes because we already talk about them and then we could talk about them again. And then we have these epiphanies while we're talking about them, which is great.
Yeah.
Stuff we didn't even
Yeah.
write in the notes. Um,
Yeah, exactly. I guess like I don't know if you're ready to put a pin in it or pin on it or however you want to say it.
Go ahead.
Do you think we're
Yeah, I
pretty
think we're
much
we're at about a good stopping point. I was thinking that, and then because you said that, but there is a Bible quote that we have here. I don't know if you wanted to.
yeah, that's where I was gonna go.
Oh, you're the best, Sharon.
So I guess because a lot of the things we talk about on our show, I think the overall encompassing thing that we talk about is love, which is about non-judgment. It's about um like forgiveness and non-judgment, these and compassion. So these are all things that we talk about on the show because of this spiritual thing that we were just talking about, because how does God see this, right? So I have a quote from the Bible in Matthew Matthew 5:43 through 48. Jesus is talking, and this is the scene where he's talking to, I think he's sitting out by the sea, and he's talking to the people. He's doing the, what is it called? I forgot what it's called. Anyway, it's a famous, there's a famous thing that this is, the section of the Bible is called.
Oh, Sermon on the Mount.
Chapters. Yes, thank you.
Oh,
Sermon on
okay.
the Mount. Yeah, yeah. So he does the Sermon on the Mount. This is part of the Sermon on the Mount, and it's talking about love. So I
I
guess,
said Sermon on the Mound.
oh, did you?
Yeah,
Serpent
Sermon on the
Mound.
Mount. Yeah, you're right. Go with what Sharon says.
I heard Mount, so
Oh, maybe I did say
it's all
Mount.
good.
Yeah, I was thinking Mound, but go ahead. I'm sorry. Sermon on the
Yeah.
Mounds. Now I want a candy bar. No.
Yeah. So I want to read this, but we also have, I think we had some notes about like love and what love encompasses, like what the word love means and how in the English language, um
Oh yeah, yeah,
like if we want to review that a little bit before I read this quote,
yeah.
we
Totally.
can.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, you
I
start.
was gonna say.
Or do
This
you want
just
me to
goes.
read the quote first?
I'll just say this, and then you could read the quote. I think it'll be better because I think the quote's a good thing to end on, and maybe people having explained this, maybe this will mean something different now to people when they hear the word love. So going back to what we were saying about words and how people have different meanings for words and it creates different pictures in different people's heads. If you go back in history, allegedly, and look at who Cecil Rhodes was, Cecil Rhodes is the guy who basically conquered South Africa for the English. And he got together with all these other people, and they're like, hey, we could probably we can control the whole world. We can do it. And the way we're going to do it is to teach everybody English. We teach everybody English, the English language. And that always kind of baffled my mind. And they talked about a little bit why, and some of the stuff I looked into, and they talked about the English language and how it is susceptible to this, right? And that's exactly what happens because all this division is created because people have different meanings for words, such as love. And it, like I said earlier, it creates a picture in one person's head when you say it, and you have a different picture in your head. So, you know,
And
go ahead,
may I interject?
please.
Like we were talking about with in Greek, we were talking with gosh darn it, can you remind me his name?
Gabe,
Thank you. We were talking to Gabe about
like dissident.
love. Yes, like dissident. Sorry, I'm like trying to think of too many things at once here.
No, I get it.
So we were talking about in Greek how there's many words for love. Well, we don't have that in English. So when you say, like, you could be like, I love pizza. Oh my God. I love hamburgers. I just love that guy. He's so amazing. But like, it's just it's, you can say that, but then when you say it to your loved one, the person that you love, whoever that is, and you say that to them, it has a different nuance. Maybe the energetic vibe is different, right? But the word is still the same. And so when you see it on paper, or when you, or even sometimes if you say it, some people may not catch the vibe of what you mean. And especially if they're foreign people who haven't really learned a lot about the language. So they might be like, oh, you love pizza? That, you know what I mean? Like, you love hamburgers that much?
Or like we used to say when we were kids, if you love it, why don't you marry it? Oh, you love
Yes,
pizza? Why don't you marry it? Right.
exactly. Exactly.
And that
Exactly.
points, and it's funny because it's a saying that kids have, and there's so much wisdom in these little sayings, right?
Mhm.
And it just
And
points.
kids are so wise, and we don't necessarily realize how
Oh, and we're
wise
going
they
to be
truly
talking
are.
about that too soon too, about how we talk to kids. And I realized this last night, how we talk to kids and we're kind of talking to them like we talk to animals, or like how we talk to stupid people. We talk to kids
Pets.
like they're stupid. Yeah, pets, it's like, I mean, I think it's okay to talk to pets that way, but when you talk to a little person that way, and every adult that they encounter is talking to them like they're stupid, could it have an effect on them? Stay tuned for more on other episodes of Oversharing. We might
We might
investigate
talk
that.
about that.
You're like, hey, bud, what are you doing over there? What's going on? Hey, like that, or hey, guy, or like, hi. Like we'll say Joe, like if your son's name is Joe. Hey, Joe, what's going on, buddy? What are you doing over there? Or, hey, Joe, how's it going? How's your day today? Did you learn anything? Like I don't know if I'm doing that right, but it's this tone, and we don't even freaking realize we're doing it. It's so crazy. But yeah, to comment on what you said about love, I think it's perfect because it goes back to what I said. You have a picture in your head when you see pizza and you're like, I love pizza, and you just mean I love to shove it into my mouth. Or I'll say like I love pizza, I love to eat it, or hamburgers or whatever, I love that
Love is the
feeling.
short word being used for like, I enjoy this behavior or I enjoy this thing. Could it be?
Yeah,
We
exactly.
don't
So, you know,
have
uh
words for that.
I have a picture in my head when I'm speaking to my beloved and I tell her that I love her. I have a picture of what I mean, what that means. And then I have a picture in my head when I'm talking to my mom and I say, Mom, I love you. And then my friends, when I tell them I love them. And then like I have this picture in my head of like great camaraderie and like a great sister. And that's why I tell Sharon I love her, because it's this relationship that we have, but it's nothing like a lover relationship, you know what I mean? But we're still saying the same word.
Yes.
But that's what happens when you speak English. So what are we going to demonize the English language and not use it? No, I think we could just elevate our consciousness. That's what I'm going to do anyway, and realize and try to show the intention, and then maybe use other words when I explain it, to people like, oh, I love you like a sister, Sharon, and Mom, you're the best mother I could have ever had. Thank you so much. I love you. And all these different things. And pizza, oh, you were always there for me, pizza. Whenever I was feeling down, you were just one phone call away, and I can enjoy my lovely
Delivery.
pizza. And I love it all. I love it all, just differently. You get it. Anyway, go ahead, read the Bible
Yeah.
quote, Sharon, and we'll stick a pin in this because it's exactly 3:33 here. That's so
Oh,
funny.
wow. Yeah. So, yeah, basically that's what we were talking about when we were talking about love. And I will also say, to add to this, is that what if it's okay to just say love? And why can't we just be okay with just loving everybody? And like, that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong. Like, but obviously there's different types of love, but don't get all your panties in a bunch. You know what I mean?
That's
Like,
another way the
yeah.
New Age inverted the spiritual and the physical. The free love in the 60s, they totally took the idea, was totally taken from love everybody in the
Holy
spiritual way and
smokes.
inverted. So you got to go out and bang everybody. And so we could fucking
Oh,
have herpes now or whatever.
snap. Yeah. So thank you, because that's what I meant, is like, love everybody in the spiritual, like, because they are your brother or sister in this spiritual realm. But with the forgiveness of, like, you know, Father, forgive them what they know, for they know not what they do, when they're doing something that you notice is potentially negative or nefarious or something, right? Forgive them, for they know not what they do, but I still love them. That's the unconditional love in the spiritual realm, but it doesn't apply to the physical. Thank you. That was boom.
Yeah, it just means that you don't hate them or have hate for them, like we said earlier, which will just consume you. That's why the Emperor wanted Luke Skywalker to strike him down in anger and kill me with your hate, and you will become what I want, and all that stuff. That's what they were trying to. Well, that's what I got out of it anyway. I don't know what Lucas was thinking, but it came out despite him, I guess, right?
Could it be? So we'll put a pin in it, and I'll read this quote from Matthew 5:43 through 48. And Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward will you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what are you doing out of the ordinary? Don't even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you
Yeah.
guys. Shout out to the chat. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. It's our favorite time of the week to hang out with the chat. We love you guys.
In the spiritual realm.
We want to marry all of you and pizza. We're going to have a crazy
A pizza
polygamy
fest.
with pizza,
And
Pizza the Hut
hamburgers.
and hamburgers. We're going to have hamburger pizza and we're going to love it. But yeah, thank you guys so much. If you'd like to support us or find more about us, you can go to morelawsmoreproblems.com, the website that I've had for over 10 years. Check out my blog on there while you're there. Also, click on the Oversharing tab and you can get all your Oversharing needs. But as always, we always say the best way to support us is just to, if you can, be here every Thursday night at 8:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we premiere these. And we have a nice little chat going. And also, what else was I? What else do I always say? Oh yeah, that's the best way you could support us. And if you can't be here, like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff. And what do we say to the good people, Sharon?
That once you start oversharing,
Then you totally stop being a Karen.
that's right.
All right, everybody. Good night.
So
We'll
share
see you
on.
next time. Share and share on. Take care, everybody. Bye.